The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, punctuated only by the distant glow of dying stars and the ethereal dance of cosmic dust. In this infinite darkness, the exploration vessel Voyager's Eye drifted silently through the outer reaches of the Zenith 9 system, its sleek hull reflecting the pale blue light of the gas giant Cobalt 7 that dominated the local sky. Captain Arya Blackwood stood on the observation deck, her reflection ghost-like against the reinforced transparasteel viewport. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, but her eyes held an intensity that spoke of something deeper than mere military duty. As the ship's chief xenoarchaeologist, she had dedicated her life to uncovering the mysteries of ancient civilizations, particularly the legendary tales of humanity and a mythical world called Earth. The Galactic Unity Alliance had been exploring this sector for months, cataloging star systems and planetary bodies in their endless quest to map the galaxy. Most discoveries were routine: dead worlds, gas giants, asteroid fields rich in minerals, but devoid of life or history. But Arya held on to hope that somewhere among the countless stars lay evidence of the civilizations that had come before. "Captain," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Commander Myron Saul, the ship's chief systems engineer, approaching with a datapad in hand. "We're picking up some unusual readings from the asteroid belt around Cobalt 7. The sensors are detecting regular metallic signatures, almost like they're arranged in a pattern." Arya's pulse quickened. After years of searching through cosmic debris and ancient ruins, she had learned to recognize when something was different. "Show me," she said, following Saul to the bridge. The bridge of Voyager's Eye was a marvel of modern technology, with holographic displays floating in midair and control interfaces that responded to both touch and thought. The crew of 37 beings from 12 different species worked in harmony, each contributing their unique abilities to the ship's mission. At the tactical station stood Lieutenant Raal Vorn, the ship's security chief, his reptilian features set in their perpetual expression of watchful suspicion. "Display the sensor readings," Arya commanded, as she took her position at the central command console. The main holographic display shimmered to life, showing a three-dimensional representation of the Cobalt 7 system. The gas giant hung in the center like a jewel, its swirling purple and blue atmosphere beautiful and deadly. Around it, the asteroid belt appeared as a scattered ring of debris, but as the sensors focused, something extraordinary became visible. "By the void," Arya whispered. There, floating in the darkness between the chunks of rock and ice, were hundreds of massive vessels. They hung motionless in the cold vacuum, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly allure, despite what must have been eons of exposure to cosmic radiation. Each ship was enormous, easily dwarfing Voyager's Eye, and their design was unlike anything in the Alliance's databases. "Those aren't asteroids," Sewell said unnecessarily, her voice filled with wonder. "No, they're not," Arya agreed, her mind racing. "Set course for the nearest vessel. Full passive scan. I want to know everything about these ships before we get too close." Lieutenant Raal stepped forward, his scaled hands clasped behind his back, in a gesture that Arya had learned to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "Captain, with respect, shouldn't we report this discovery to Alliance Command before proceeding? Unknown vessels of this size could represent a significant threat." Arya turned to face her security chief. Raal was a capable officer, but his training emphasized caution and threat assessment above all else. While she valued his input, she couldn't let fear override the greatest archaeological discovery in centuries. "We'll report our findings, Lieutenant, but not until we have something concrete to report. For all we know, these vessels have been derelict for millennia. Our first priority is scientific investigation." Raal's expression remained neutral, but Arya could see the tension in his posture. "As you wish, Captain. I'll prepare security teams for boarding operations." "That won't be necessary yet," Arya replied. Let's see what we can learn from long-range scans first. As Voyager's eye approached the mysterious fleet, the scale of the discovery became even more apparent. The vessels varied in size and configuration, but all shared certain design elements that suggested they belonged to the same civilization. Their hulls were smooth and dark, almost organic in appearance, with strange symbols etched along their surfaces that seemed to shift and change in the light. "Captain," called Ensign Crix from the sensor station, his insectoid compound eyes reflecting the glow of his instruments. "I'm detecting power signatures from several of the vessels. They're minimal, but definitely present. Some kind of low-level energy field is maintaining structural integrity and, if I'm reading this correctly, life support systems." Arya's breath caught. "Life support? Are you saying there are living beings aboard those ships?" "The readings are consistent with cryogenic preservation systems," Crix replied. "Massive ones. Each vessel appears to be maintaining thousands of individual stasis pods." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't looking at an ancient graveyard of ships. They were looking at a sleeping army. "This changes everything," Sewell said quietly. "We need to—" She was interrupted by a sudden chiming from the communications array. All eyes turned to the communications officer, an ethereal being whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Captain," the officer said, their voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the fleet." Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Put it through." The main display shifted to show a communication interface, static crackling across the screen. Then, slowly, an image began to form. It was geometric, almost crystalline in structure, clearly artificial intelligence rather than organic life. "Unknown vessel," came a voice that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have approached the Terran Defense Fleet. State your identity and purpose." Arya stepped forward, acutely aware that she was about to make first contact with a civilization that had been sleeping for an unimaginable length of time. "This is Captain Arya Blackwood of the Galactic Unity Alliance vessel, Voyager's Eye. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and understanding. May I ask who I'm speaking with?" The geometric form shifted and pulsed. "I am Sentry Zero, Guardian of the Fleet, Keeper of the Watch. The Terran Defense Fleet has maintained its vigil for 500,000 solar cycles, awaiting the time of awakening. You claim to represent a galactic alliance. Prove your peaceful intentions." "Terran." The word sent electricity through Arya's veins. Terra, the ancient name for Earth, the mythical homeworld of humanity. She was speaking to a guardian of human vessels, ships that had been sleeping in space for 500,000 years. "Sentry Zero," she said carefully. "We are explorers and scientists. We seek to understand the civilizations that came before us. We have no hostile intentions toward your fleet or its occupants." "Your words are noted," Sentry Zero replied. "However, verification protocols must be completed. Transmit your vessel's identification codes and historical records." Arya looked to Saul, who was already working at her station. "Transmitting now," the engineer reported. Long minutes passed as Sentry Zero presumably analyzed their data. Arya found herself holding her breath, aware that the next few moments could determine whether they made the greatest discovery in galactic history or triggered an interstellar incident. "Your records indicate that your species achieved spaceflight approximately 200,000 solar cycles ago," Sentry Zero finally said. "This places your civilization's emergence well after the Great Departure. You are not Draxian. This is acceptable." "Draxian?" Arya asked. "The enemy," Sentry Zero replied simply. "The reason for the fleet's long vigil. But that is a story for another time. Your request for knowledge is approved. One vessel may approach for limited cultural exchange. Be advised that any hostile action will result in immediate defensive response." Arya looked around the bridge, seeing the mixture of excitement and apprehension on her crew's faces. This was the moment they had trained for. First contact with an ancient civilization. Understood, Sentry Zero. We're honored by your trust. As Voyager's eye moved closer to the designated vessel, Arya couldn't help but marvel at the sight before them. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of their own vessel, with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange conduits ran along its surface, pulsing with a faint blue-green energy that created intricate patterns across the dark metal. Docking bay is opening, Sol reported. They're extending what appears to be an atmospheric tunnel. All sensors on maximum sensitivity, Arya ordered. I want complete scans of everything we encounter. Ral, select a minimal security detail. Phasers on stun, and they stay holstered unless I give direct orders. The security chief nodded grimly. Yes, Captain. Though I still think we should maintain a safe distance and request Alliance backup. Noted, Lieutenant. But this opportunity may never come again. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth. The ancient systems interfacing seamlessly with their modern technology. As the airlock sealed and atmospheric pressure equalized, Arya felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She was about to step aboard a vessel that had been traveling through space since before her species had discovered fire. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that took Arya's breath away. The walls were lined with what appeared to be living metal, surfaces that rippled and flowed like liquid mercury, but maintained their structural integrity. Bioluminescent strips provided gentle illumination, creating an environment that felt more organic than mechanical. Welcome aboard the UTS Endurance, came Sentry Zero's voice from speakers hidden in the walls. Please follow the illuminated path to the data archive chamber. Arya's team consisted of herself, Sol, 2 security officers, and Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist. They moved carefully through the corridors, their instruments recording everything, while their eyes tried to take in details that seemed to shift and change with each step. The technology is incredible, Dr. Vasquez whispered. These walls aren't just metal. They're some kind of programmable matter. The entire ship appears to be self-maintaining. They passed viewing ports that looked out into the ship's interior, revealing vast chambers filled with row upon row of cylindrical pods. Each pod glowed with the same blue-green energy they had seen on the hull, and within each one, Arya could make out the shadowy outline of a humanoid figure. Are they human? She asked Sentry Zero. Terran human. Yes. The population of New Geneva Colony, military personnel from the Terran Defense Force, and civilian volunteers. Approximately 847,000 individuals across all vessels in the fleet. The number staggered Arya. Nearly 1 million people sleeping in the void, waiting for a tomorrow that might never come. How long have they been in stasis? 500,000 years, 4 months, 17 days, 6 hours, and 23 minutes. Sentry Zero replied with mechanical precision. The ceasefire accord specified that they would remain in stasis until either the Draxian threat was neutralized or contact was made with a spacefaring civilization capable of ensuring their protection. They reached the data archive chamber, a spherical room filled with floating holographic displays. The walls were covered with star charts, historical records, and what appeared to be cultural artifacts from Earth and human colonies. At the center of the room stood a complex holographic projector that activated as they entered. I will now share the record of the Draxian War, Sentry Zero announced. The room transformed around them, becoming a 3-dimensional theater of galactic history. They watched as the story unfolded, humanity's expansion into space, the discovery of the Draxian Empire, and the brutal war that followed. The Draxians were shown as a militaristic species that viewed other sapient life as either slaves or obstacles to be destroyed. The war lasted 847 standard years. Sentry Zero narrated as they watched entire star systems burn. Humanity fought bravely, but the Draxians possessed superior numbers and technology. Defeat was inevitable. The hologram showed the final human evacuation. Massive fleets carrying the survivors of dead worlds, seeking refuge in the depths of space. But the Draxians pursued relentlessly, until humanity faced complete extinction. It was then that the ceasefire accord was signed. Sentry Zero continued. A temporary truce that would allow humanity to enter stasis while the galaxy moved beyond the era of Draxian dominance. When safe contact could be made with other civilizations, the awakening would begin. Arya felt her throat tighten with emotion. She was looking at the last remnant of an entire species, preserved in hope that someday they might find a place in a galaxy that had moved on without them. The Draxians, she asked quietly. What happened to them? Unknown. No Draxian vessels have been detected for approximately 200,000 years. It is presumed they either destroyed themselves through internal conflict or evolved beyond their aggressive nature. The galaxy appears to have moved into a new era of cooperation and exploration. Saul stepped forward, her engineering mind focused on practical matters. Sentry Zero. What would be required to safely awaken the fleet? The revival process would require extensive preparation. Life support systems must be gradually restored, atmospheric processors reactivated, and social integration protocols established. A full awakening would take approximately 6 months and would require the cooperation of a technologically advanced civilization. Arya exchanged glances with her team. The implications were staggering. They weren't just looking at an archaeological discovery. They were looking at the potential resurrection of an entire civilization. I need to consult with my crew, Arya said finally. This decision is far beyond my authority alone. Understood. I will maintain minimal systems while you consider. However, be advised that if hostile intentions are detected, defense protocols will activate automatically. As they made their way back to Voyager's Eye, Arya's mind raced with possibilities and problems. The crew gathered in the main conference room, the weight of their discovery heavy in the air. The sociological implications alone are staggering, Dr. Vasquez said, pacing back and forth. We're talking about people who went to sleep when the galaxy was at war. How do we integrate them into a peaceful alliance of species they've never encountered? Saul nodded agreement. And the technology transfer could revolutionize everything we know about space travel and life support systems. That programmable matter alone could advance our engineering capabilities by centuries. But it was Rael who voiced the concerns that Arya knew were weighing on everyone's minds. With respect, Captain, we're also talking about nearly 1 million military personnel from a warlike era. What if they view our alliance as another threat? What if they decide the galaxy needs to be conquered rather than joined? They've been at peace for 500,000 years, Arya replied. Whatever they were before, they chose stasis over continued warfare. Because they were losing, Raal countered. Desperate people make dangerous decisions. I recommend we report this discovery to Alliance Command and let them decide how to proceed. This is beyond our capability to handle alone. Arya knew Raal was right about reporting to Command, but she also knew what the Alliance bureaucracy would do. They would send committees and subcommittees, each with their own agenda. The decision would be debated for years, while the sleeping fleet continued its vigil. I'll send a preliminary report, she decided. But we need to be prepared for immediate action. If Sentry Zero decides to begin awakening the fleet, we need to be ready to help or defend ourselves. Her words proved prophetic. 3 days later, as they continued studying the fleet and transmitting data back to Alliance Command, Sentry Zero's voice suddenly filled the bridge. Captain Blackwood, I have received disturbing intelligence. Long-range sensors have detected vessels approaching the system. They bear energy signatures consistent with Draxian technology. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as crew members rushed to their stations. "Impossible!" Sul breathed. "You said the Draxians disappeared 200,000 years ago." "Apparently, some survived," Sentry Zero replied. "The revival network is activating. The fleet will begin awakening procedures in 6 hours. Prepare for possible combat operations." Arya felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "Sentry Zero, wait! We need to analyze these contacts first. They might not be hostile." "Negative. The survival of humanity takes precedence over diplomatic considerations. The awakening cannot be stopped once initiated." Throughout the fleet, the ancient vessels began to stir. Navigation lights flickered to life. Engine cores began their slow startup sequences. And most importantly, the cryogenic systems started their revival protocols. After 500,000 years of sleep, humanity was waking up. "Captain," Rahl said, his voice tight with barely controlled urgency. "I'm reading massive power buildups throughout the fleet. If those are weapon systems coming online, we're looking at firepower that could level entire star systems." Arya stared at the tactical display, watching as the sleeping giants around them began to wake. Each vessel was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Alliance fleet. If they decided the galaxy was still their enemy, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Sentry Zero," she said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "Please reconsider. Give us time to verify the nature of these approaching vessels. If they are hostile, we'll stand with you. But if they're peaceful, we could be starting a war that doesn't need to happen." "The safety of humanity cannot be compromised by uncertainty," the AI replied. "The awakening continues." It was then that Raal made his move. Arya saw him quietly signal the security team, then step toward the communications console. She realized with horror what he intended to do. "Lieutenant, stand down," she ordered. "I'm sorry, Captain, but I cannot allow this to continue. Those weapon systems could threaten every world in the Alliance. I'm implementing emergency protocols." Raal's hands flew over the console, attempting to override the ship's communications array and send an emergency distress signal that would bring Alliance military forces to destroy the awakening fleet. Arya lunged toward him, but Sol was faster, tackling the security chief away from the controls. "You don't understand," Arya shouted over the struggle. "These people have been asleep for 500,000 years. They're not our enemies." "They're not our friends either," Raal shot back, breaking free from Sol's grip. "We don't know what they'll do when they wake up." The argument was interrupted by a new voice from the communications array, weak, confused, but undeniably human. This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the UTS Endurance." What's happening?" "Sentry Zero, report status." "Commander Mitchell," the AI replied, its tone noticeably different when addressing a human. "You have been in stasis for 513 years. Potential hostile contacts detected. The fleet is awakening to respond to the threat." 500,000 years? The human voice was filled with wonder and confusion. "But the war, the Draxians—" "The Draxians appear to have survived, Commander. Long-range sensors indicate vessels approaching with their energy signatures." Arya stepped forward quickly. "Commander Mitchell, this is Captain Arya Blackwood of the Galactic Unity Alliance. We're not your enemies. We've been studying your fleet for several days, learning about your people and your history. The approaching vessels may not be hostile. We need time to verify their intentions." There was a long pause before Commander Mitchell responded. "Sentry Zero, what can you tell me about this alliance?" "Analysis of their records indicates a multi-species confederation dedicated to peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. No evidence of aggressive expansion or territorial conquest. They appear to represent the type of civilization the ceasefire accord specified as suitable for contact." Another pause. Longer this time. Arya could almost hear the commander struggling to process 500,000 years of change in a few minutes. Sentry Zero, suspend the awakening process. Bring me and my senior staff online, but keep the general population in stasis until we can assess the situation properly. Commander, the approaching vessels are 12 hours away according to my tactical display. That gives us time to think instead of react. Humanity has been asleep for 500,000 years. We can spare a few more hours to make sure we don't start another war. Arya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Commander Mitchell sounded like exactly the kind of leader humanity would need in this situation. Thoughtful, cautious, but not paralyzed by fear. Over the next several hours, the situation slowly stabilized. Commander Mitchell and her senior staff were successfully revived, and after brief medical checks and orientation briefings, they met with Arya's team aboard Voyager's Eye. The human officers were remarkably adaptable, though Arya could see the strain in their faces as they struggled to comprehend the time that had passed. "The galaxy we knew is gone," Mitchell said quietly, as she studied star charts showing the current political situation. The Draxian Empire, the colonial territories, even most of the star systems we called home have changed or disappeared entirely. "Your species adapted and survived in a way," Arya replied. "You preserved yourselves and your culture until the galaxy was ready for peace." Mitchell nodded slowly. "And now we need to decide what comes next. Sentry Zero, what's the status on those approaching vessels?" "They will arrive within the system in approximately 4 hours. However, additional analysis has revealed anomalies in their energy signatures. They appear to be archaeological vessels, rather than military craft." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. After 500,000 years of waiting for humanity to wake up, they were about to be discovered by other archaeologists. "Well," Mitchell said with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, "I suppose it's time to meet our new neighbors." The meeting that followed would go down in galactic history as the most significant first contact event ever recorded. The Draxian vessels turned out to be operated by the hegemony of Vale, a confederation of species that had evolved from some of the Draxians' former subject races. They had spent millennia searching for evidence of the ancient Terran civilization, hoping to learn what had happened to the species that had fought so bravely against their oppressors. Far from being enemies, they had come to honor humanity's memory. The negotiations that followed were complex and delicate. Commander Mitchell and the awakened human leadership worked closely with Alliance diplomats to establish protocols for the gradual revival of the fleet. It would be a slow process. Small groups awakened over time, given education about the current galaxy, and gradually integrated into Alliance society. Some humans chose to join exploration fleets, their centuries of military experience valuable in the peaceful work of charting unknown space. Others became teachers and historians, sharing their preserved culture with species that had only heard legends of Earth. Many chose to settle on Alliance worlds, bringing their unique perspectives to communities that welcomed them. The technology exchange proved equally beneficial. Human stasis technology revolutionized medical treatment, while Alliance biotechnology helped the awakening humans adapt to a galaxy filled with new allergies and pathogens their immune systems had never encountered. The programmable matter of human ships led to breakthroughs in construction and manufacturing that benefited every member species of the Alliance. But perhaps most importantly, the discovery of the sleeping fleet changed how the galaxy viewed its own history. Here was proof that civilizations could endure, that hope could survive even the darkest times, and that sometimes the greatest victory was knowing when to wait for a better tomorrow. Arya stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned UTS Endurance, now serving as a joint Alliance human cultural exchange vessel. Through the viewport, she could see the other ships of the ancient fleet, most still in stasis, but gradually awakening as the integration process continued. Commander Mitchell joined her at the viewport, looking much healthier now that she had fully adapted to the 51st century. "Any regrets?" Arya asked. Mitchell considered the question carefully. About the war? About the time we lost? No. We made the best decision we could with the information we had. And look what we found when we woke up. A galaxy at peace, filled with species working together instead of destroying each other. That's worth sleeping for. Even if you can never go home to Earth? Earth is gone, Mitchell said simply. The star burned out 200,000 years ago. But home isn't a place. It's the people you choose to be with and the future you decide to build. And this future, this alliance of peaceful species exploring the galaxy together, this is exactly what we were fighting to protect. Through the viewport, another ship in the fleet began to stir, its running lights flickering to life as another group of humans prepared to meet their new galaxy. Each awakening was a celebration, a life restored, and a perspective gained. The sleeping war fleet had become something its builders never imagined. Not weapons to fight an ancient enemy, but seeds of hope planted in the darkness of space, waiting for the right time to bloom. And when they finally did, they found a galaxy ready to welcome them home. Arya watched the lights of the awakening ship grow brighter and smiled. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries weren't ancient ruins or lost technologies. Sometimes, they were simply the realization that no matter how dark the present might seem, tomorrow could always be better. And sometimes, if you were patient enough and brave enough to believe in that tomorrow, you might just live to see it. The stars had waited 500,000 years to welcome humanity back. Now, finally, they were home.